Thank you very much, everybody. Well, we understand that from previous breakfasts, having a panel of people to discuss the theme has worked really well in terms of increasing our understanding of the reconciliation journey. Today is really important because we're wanting to celebrate the 20th year of Reconciliation Australia and to answer sometimes the criticism of the reconciliation journey, which is just all about words, and it's moving the words into action. And that's why we were very pleased to be able to launch our Innovate Wrap this morning as a reconciliation organisation, because we need to be able to walk the talk. I hope when you get to read our Innovate Wrap that you'll understand that we're also on a journey of action and ensuring that we're engaging all South Australians in this conversation. Today we're very fortunate, as you know, we have Karen Mundine, who is the CEO of Reconciliation Australia, and it's always a privilege to see Karen. Unfortunately with COVID-19 she couldn't get here last year, but she certainly was able to be here today, as you know, and she has given us great feedback in our journey about developing our Innovate Wrap, and is always involved in many wraps, as you know, it's signing off on those. So welcome, Karen. Thank you, Mickey O'Brien, for your acknowledgement of country.
Thanks.
And I also like to add my acknowledgement to the First Nations people in the room and pay my respects to your elders past and present and the future generation, because it's really great to see the young people here. So I'm going to now ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves, but you note that in our program that you will be taking away, there is their short history of their work over the last number of their life and their contribution to the reconciliation agenda. So, Mickey?
Nature, Mickey O'Brien, and a proud descendant of the Kaurna and Narunga people of the York Peninsula, and was born and continue to live in the great heart of Yadabolti, being the place of sleep at Port Adelaide, and a community member, and so it's wonderful to be a part of this panel this morning. Thank you, Peter.
Associate Professor Simone, to introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Peter. So my name is Simone Willalgatur, and I'm Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous at Flinders University. I'm from the Yangunjata community, but I do want to acknowledge Kaurna and also all elders here today and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members.
Okay, thanks very much, Simone. Gavin, please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Sure. Morning, everyone. Gavin Brown, Wiradjuri man, Binjang Wiradjuri from a little town called Wellington, in the middle of New South Wales, near Dubbo, the people that know it. I'd also like to acknowledge country, pay respects to the Kaurna people, but also to all those old people that sacrificed so much to get us where we are today. Thank you.
And good morning, Kate. Last but not least, thank you very much for being a part of the panel this morning. Could you introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Kate Mount, and I'm the Director of St Peter's Girls Early Learning Centre, and I'm here today representing the very young children that we work with every day, which is the joy of my life. And we are situated on Kaurna land, and I'd also like to acknowledge that we are on Kaurna land today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I've got a set of questions I'll be asking you, and you can also jump in if you'd like to also add something to the conversation this morning. So the first question, what do you think is some of the major misconceptions about reconciliation and its work? Can I ask Karen that?
Yes, I guess that was directed to me. Also, I'm Karen Mundine. I'm a Bundjalung woman from northern New South Wales, and I just want to add my acknowledgement to the Kaurna people. I always feel very blessed and supported whenever I'm on this country, and I pay respect to all the old people, those that are with us and those that have passed. Criticisms of reconciliation. Let's start with an easy one, shall we, Peter? I think anyone that is in this room, and I have to say this is my first time here in Adelaide and first time at this breakfast, and it is amazing to be a part of this. I don't think anyone that is here would be surprised when people say we often in the reconciliation space are talking about soft issues, or it's about the morning tea or the breakfast or the cup of tea. And I think that's really what we were trying to not just address, but I guess raise the challenge to all of our supporters, our allies in this space, of how do we make this more than just words. I've grown up my entire life in Indigenous affairs, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs. As a kid sitting in the backs of rooms while meetings and things were happening, I've seen all of the reports, and in my professional life have been part of writing a bunch of those reports, and they sit in a shelf in my garage. I want it to be more than words. I want reconciliation to be felt by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, as well as the broader Australian community in our everyday lives, because that's what reconciliation is about. It's about our relationships, it's about how we live, how we work, how we socialise, how we engage, but how we make this a better place for all of us. Because it's when we do that, when we get it right, we do amazing things, and we have so much to learn.
Absolutely. Now, we know education about reconciliation journey is really important. So, Simone, can I ask you the next question, which is, what do you think the role universities or education authorities can actually play in ensuring that all Australians understand the true history of our shared history in this country?
I think universities can play a really important role. I mean, universities are sites of knowledge production and education, teaching, learning and research. But central to that is the way in which we communicate Indigenous ways of knowing and being. It's actually really contributing to the broader economy of our communities, but also acknowledging that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have something to offer, both in terms of our community aspirations, in terms of our students coming through, but also in terms of scholarship. Our communities have engaged in knowledge production for time immemorial, and so how we can contribute to that through the university space, I think, can be really important. And we have a large reach in universities. We teach thousands of students, and so we have an incredible educational audience who can begin to be part of our RAP community. And I agree with Karen, it's actually about taking the action. It's moving, the symbolic is very important, but it's also moving beyond the symbolic to actually make change, and the way you make change is with future leaders.
You have an Innovate RAP. What were the challenges to actually move from into that space of an Innovate RAP and to be a real innovator, leader, change maker in this space?
So we are a year on into our Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan. I think the challenges are, it's about bringing the university community with you. The way we approached that, however, was centring our students in that process, and it takes leadership from our senior management, and I really do want to acknowledge the leadership of our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Colin Sterling, because it takes leadership to lead, but it also requires a grounding approach as well. And so part of that process in terms of trying to bring the university community with us is about consultation. And we spent about 18 months speaking to staff, students and traditional custodians and owners on where our university footprints reaches in terms of South Australia, rural remote areas and Northern Territory.
What is one piece of practical advice you would give to people starting out on the journey of developing a RAP from the challenges that you've had to get to where you are today?
So I've thought a bit about that, and I think it's a really important question. And for me, I think it is about really finding your leaders and your strategic allies, but it's also about knowing the country you're on. The first step is knowing where you are and also understanding the impact of colonialism and how your organisation has contributed to colonialism as an ongoing impact, and that's about that truth-telling component. I also think it takes maturity of an organisation, and so you need those leaders and strategic allies to really engage in deep listening. And I think 1 year on, in terms of our anniversary, where we've set the foundations for our RAP, it is now about that action-oriented implementation. It's about accountability as an institution to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities.
Kate, in the early years, is a very important sector of our education process. What do you think are the major challenges in the early years? I mean, starting with really young people to see the idea of reconciliation and what that means.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge is getting our voices heard. So working with 2 to 5-year-olds, we've had many opportunities to actually take action, and obviously working very closely with a Kaurna elder, we've really been able to build our confidence and strategies around how we give visibility to the work that's happening in the early childhood sector. So even though I'm representing one centre today, I'm actually representing, I think, the wider voice of the early childhood sector, because I think the children are the ones that are taking the message forward. One of the exciting things that we've done in our ELC is write our own acknowledgement to country, which we say every single morning. We say it in language as well. Uncle Tamaru has taught us how to say it in Kaurna. And that's really powerful. So getting that out to the community is a really strong message and a strong action moving forward.
Now, you feel really confident about participating in the Narragani Wally Awards, which are the Reconciliation Awards for schools. What gave you the confidence to move into that space and to be measured up across the sector for your leadership?
Well, I think it's a big thing to put yourself forward, but I think it's about having vision, and there's no point us remaining insular in our silo. We really have to get the message out there that this is something that everyone can participate in. And I think it's when you put down all that you do next to the key pillars of the RAP, and you think, oh my goodness, we actually do so much in action every single day. So it's not just a curriculum tick the box, it's actually something that is embedded in our beliefs and in our heart. And so when that is the case, you can actually take the confidence to put yourselves forward for an award. One of the key elements of that, of course, is the long-standing relationship we have with our Kaurna community, and the fact that we are on Kaurna land. We really have a very strong connection to the land next door to our school, which is Ferguson Park, which is a beautiful, beautiful space for us to take the children in to learn about Gunayasha. You know, we sit and we put our hands in the dirt and we actually experience and feel. So I think it's very authentic for us, the work that we do.
And thank you very much for starting it off in the early years. As I said, it's a very important stage of educating young people. Gavin, PriceWaterhouseCoopers, and the work that you do, can you tell us what are the major challenges you have in your area of work, where you're working with the business community and both government, non-government, and the business community?
Yeah, sure. I think they're not dissimilar to Simone was talking about in terms of leadership. There's a vision piece and there's a maturity piece. So even some of these conversations, we weren't having them 5 and 10 years ago. Children, centering this stuff in early childhood and centering this stuff in the academy. And then in business, we see the same continuum. There's some groups that are really keen to do stuff, some interesting catalysts about how they come about, like BLM and those sorts of things offshore have really catalysed some things onshore, which is sort of interesting. But so we'll get a large range of groups, everything from multinationals, just wanting to understand what this is, what does it mean exactly, and what is it practically for them as a business, into governments, into the sort of, I guess, elevate sort of rap community, thinking about how they stretch themselves and how they further mature their approach.
Thank you. Brother Michael, well known for your wonderful welcomes to country and acknowledgement of country, and we thank you again for coming here this morning and honouring us. What do you think when you hear the criticism from non-Indigenous Australia when they say, oh, here we go again, there's the welcome to country, and how do you make sure people really understand what the protocol actually means to us as Indigenous peoples, and what it should mean to non-Indigenous people?
Well, it's quite simple, really, Peter, and thanks for the question. The aspect of a welcome is what all cultures have always continued to do, and we don't recognise it a lot of the times in the Western world, and as we do largely in our cultural world. And you know, even coming here today, I'm sure people have greeted each other and said hello. And when you come to somebody's house, you welcome them in, you show them around, and you have a conversation and give them a meal. And that's what we're doing when we do a welcome. We're basically simulating and acknowledging and welcoming people into our home, which then becomes their home. And that's why we sort of say, if you look after it, it'll look after you. And I think that's really important. When we really can clearly picture that, then I think we have a greater connection and an understanding of how important a welcome is, because it is about giving you safe passage. It's about connecting you to the land and looking after you, and I think that's really important. But if I can say that, you know, I think when we talk about reconciliation, you know, it is really about that deeper understanding about reconciling those injustices of the past, and not just understanding them and acknowledging them, but taking ownership so that we don't continue those forward. And, you know, as I see with many reconciliation action plans, I tend to sadly see them as more awareness plans, because they're very much passive actions rather than a proactive approach and working forward. And you know, I leave this final sort of quote that I saw once by Frederick Hayek, who was a Nobel Prize winner, and he said that it's all the difference in the world when we treat people equally than attempt to make them equals. And I think that's the key point here is Aboriginal people are different people, and if we continue to try to put them in the box of what is the dominant culture, I think that's why we're, I think, sometimes not able to reach the changes and the needs and the benefits of Aboriginal people, because as we see, statistics are still showing us the highest overrepresenting of many of those things, rather than understanding and embracing the culture itself. So thanks, Peter.
Karen.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on that, and I guess circling back to the theme of this week, so more than a word, reconciliation takes action. It's those very points that Michael was talking about. We launched our State of Reconciliation in Australia report at the beginning of the year, and it's an opportunity every 4 years just to take stock of where we've been, but how are we tracking against these ideas of reconciliation, and really chart a path for what are the things that are still outstanding. And over the last 2 reports, the 2 things that remain actually on an increase in terms of those negative outcomes for First Nations people are our children in out-of-home care and incarceration rates. And so I guess for us, it was a tipping point. We've got more Australians engaged in the reconciliation process than ever before. We've got 1,100 organisations that have active reconciliation action plans, and I think about 1,200 or more schools and early learning services that are engaged. So that's 3 million Australians that are either working in or studying in an organisation that has a RAP, and then another 3 million Australians who are members of, so a sporting club member, who also have a RAP. So that's 6 million Australians. We have more people than ever. We've seen 10-point jumps in terms of awareness and understanding of issues when it comes to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. But what we're not seeing in the statistics are those positive outcomes and beneficial outcomes for First Nations people, particularly those that are vulnerable. So I guess, again, that just challenged us to think about how do we turn this amazing group of people, these allies and supporters who are here and connected and committed to reconciliation, how do we actually turn that into actions that systemically change the way things are happening and the outcomes for our people?
So that, continuing with the theme, to move out of the safe conversations to have brave conversations, to ask the hard questions of government. It's much more than flying the flag or acknowledging country. We need to dig deeper in that, and that means it's got to be, I think, systemic self-examination that you're talking about. So how do you get people to move out of their safety of, ticking the box, we've got a RAP, but what is the impact of your RAP in your institution and in the community? Can I ask that of the panel, and those that want to answer, jump in.
Well, I'd love to answer that, just because we have those brave and very honest conversations with our youngest children, our citizens of today and of tomorrow. And we were confronted when we first began having these conversations a few years ago. We were confronted by a parent group who challenged us on why we were talking to children about these big issues. And I think that was a turning point, because that made us really advocate even harder and stand up for what we thought, children deserve to know and can manage. The complexity of children's thinking is huge, and our image of child is strong, and so is our image of educator. So, we're in for the challenge, and we're brave to have those conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
Yeah, I think from our institutional, so going from the early childhood, I guess, to adult education in terms of the tertiary sector, it is about really challenging ourselves to actually have those hard conversations, and that can occur through teaching and learning and through research. But the approach we've also taken at Flinders is we have elders on campus. So we have our elder authorities that we go to. We have Uncle Lewis Yellowburka O'Brien, who's here today, as our Kaurna elder on campus. Our other two largest footprints is Aranda Country, Alice Springs, and we have Auntie Pat Miller. And in Larrakia Country, Darwin, we have Uncle Richard Fijo. And they are also challenging us to actually step up as elders who have, engaged in activism, change, social justice for our communities. Their perspectives are really important, and we actually need to hear them. And it actually gives younger leadership, upcoming leadership, but also the university community to actually hear and centre our voices in structural change. And that can be challenging. Sometimes those messages can be challenging, but we need to step up to it as a community. We need to show that maturity. And so our elders have helped guide us through that process.
So Gavin, how do you inspire those organisations that you work with about the need to have a really action-orientated RAP? So it's a bit more than a welcome to country, flying the flag, having safe yarns, but having braver yarns.
Yeah, I think it actually starts with ourselves. Like we've Pick and Peter BC gone on our own journey now at Elevate. But I mean, I've spoken to my sister about this before. Perhaps she's not too upset about it. But I was traditionally a bit of a skeptic, to be honest, about RAPs. We'd all seen, I think we've talked about it here, the morning teas and stuff. And we're thinking, well, we've seen enough examples of things that looked a bit disingenuous and you were wondering about them. So I've gone through my own and the business's journey around, well, what does it mean exactly, and what are these real things that are going to generate some real things for our mob. And so in our space, like we've sort of walked the talk, and then from that can come from a place of like at least understanding and putting ourselves on the hook. So we've got 100 jobs that we've committed to publicly for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the businesses. I think we'll go beyond that, but that's been part of our journey and sort of a realisation that these RAPs and reconciliation can actually drive practical change. And then from off the back of that, we'll get government, but often non-government, coming to us and asking us about our own journey and sort of the parallels and how they might seek to drive the agenda a bit more forcefully. and there, I think, is there's some interesting signals. So when RAPs in a CSR or a D&I, like an offshoot of an offshoot of an offshoot, you wonder about strategy and the pull and the sponsorship there for them genuinely in those organisations. But there has been a maturity, I think, more generally across government and non-government to have these sorts of conversations, and people seem to be more and more up for, wanting to make the practical difference, which is why I think this thing resonates this year so much with us, but also what we've seen. So I think the landscape's changed in PwC. There are 9,000 people. Average age is 27. There's been a bit of a generational shift. People are more socially aware. People generally want to do more. The years of just killing yourself at work and then retiring, people are more aware of this sort of social justice mentality and keen to do something. So for us, it's walking the talk ourselves first before we talk to provide advice to others. But that advice to others, I think, is more about being realistic and being up for it. So it's not, you're not going to do it in a year or 2 years or 5 years or, in our case, 10 years.
Yep.
And we're still struggling with it. So
Thank you very much.
Pete, if I can just say, I mean, really, if we don't have to go back that far. We really have to go back 185 years, really, and we know the South Australian Act of 1834 indicated that this place was unoccupied, and then the King William, he changed it in 1836 and wrote that letters patent, which changed it, and he said that he wanted the Aboriginal people to be recognised, to be a part of this land and to own and occupy the land and to be treated as equals and to roam freely. And when you understand those true values, that's where we need to be going back to, is to really those founding words and documents that was meant to be the understanding and the cultures coming together. And when you look at democracy, which is what we're a part of, Aboriginal people had a democracy system, but it was slightly different than the Western world. Our democracy said that though you had the greatest number, had the greatest voice, but they always looked after the minority first and made a voice for them first to give them their needs before you gave the needs to the greater number. And when we understand that, we as Aboriginal people are the minority group, and as we saw last year with the Voice Treaty and I can't remember the other word, Voice Treaty and Truth, we understand those greater connections and how we can truly move forward, and it takes brave people to do that and not be afraid, really.
Well, let's hope that we can have that truth-telling that's very much a very important part of this reconciliation. Because you're a guest, and I'm going to get into trouble, Karen, can you just give us about a 1 minute or last piece of advice on how we're going? We brag about that we're leaders, but what more can we do to be a bit more proactive?
So I think my fellow panellists have really said it all. It's about leadership, and that doesn't just mean being the boss or the CEO. Or each of us can be leaders in our everyday lives and in the things that we do. We all have that capacity. It is about maturity. It's about taking what we've learnt. RA's been in this business now for 20 years, and we've learnt a lot in the process. We've gathered a huge network of people, and we're learning constantly every day from that network. And we're listening to elders, we're listening to traditional owners, we're listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Place is what it's all about. We are all grounded and connected by the country that we live on, that we play on, that we learn on, that we socialise on. And it's the basis of those relationships, when we are respectful, when we are connected, that creates the opportunity to do amazing things. And then bravery. It's about taking those brave steps, and that is different for everyone. Sometimes it's just having that conversation or turning up at events like this. Sometimes it's challenging our leaders, our political leaders, our bosses around things that we know aren't quite right. Or it's about stepping up and having that hard conversation with a family member or a friend that really challenges in that very personal way. But that's what leadership is, and that's what it takes if we're going to become a just, equitable and reconciled Australia.
Thanks very much, Karen. Now we've unfortunately run out of time because we have some further entertainment for everybody. But thank you very much for coming today, and we look forward to your continuing contribution, and let's hope we see people at the anniversary convention later this year that Reconciliation Australia is hosting. Thank you very much, panel, very much for your contribution today.